Okay, so I'm sure a lot of us have grown up watching cartoons or like Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. Well, in my presentation, I will inform you on how television can have a significant negative effect on young viewers. Kids nowadays are raised in a very digital world, and television plays a central role in their everyday lives. I'll first talk about how much children are exposed to television, then I'll discuss some theories surrounding the subject, and lastly, I'll cover how influential television can be on the development of younger audiences. So first of all, children are being exposed to much more television and digital media nowadays. Common Sense Media, a nonprofit that provides education to families to promote safe technology and media for children, released a report in 2017 that said children up to 8 years old spend an average of 2 hours and 19 minutes every day on screen media. TV and video viewing alone took up 72% of that screen time. That's a 30-minute increase from 2011, when the average daily screen media time for the same age group was only 1 hour and 55 minutes. For 8 to 12-year-olds, the average time spent using screen media was 4 hours and 36 minutes every day. So that's nearly a 2-hour increase in daily screen time compared to the younger age group. And 62% of those who were surveyed said that they watch TV every single day. So now that you know how much television and screen media children are exposed to, my second point will help to understand the implications of this amount of exposure. So Professor George Gerbner created a theory in 1976 that stated that heavy viewers of television cultivate a worldview that is at odds with reality. So this can perpetuate stereotypes or focus more on small problems. For example, if someone stays inside their entire life, or not their entire life, all day, and they only watch news about crime, they would believe that the crime rate is actually higher than it actually is, and that they might easily become a victim of a crime. So heavy viewers become more cautious and wary of reality and of the outside world. The biggest conclusion of the cultivation theory is the mean world syndrome. Heavy viewers are exposed to more violence on TV, and therefore they believe that the world is a far more dangerous and worse place than it actually is. They believe that people are just looking out for themselves, and that most people will take advantage of others if given the chance. And with that, let's move on to my third point of how TV affects the minds of developing children. So children are very impressionable at young ages. And Nicole Martins, an assistant professor in the Department of Telecommunications at Indiana University, said that the first 3 years are a time of rapid brain growth, and children learn best from interaction with parents and caregivers, and not from screen media. So in 2011, there was a study in the Journal of Pediatrics that had 64-year-olds randomly assigned to watch SpongeBob, or PBS's Caillou, or draw for 9 minutes. They were then given 4 tasks that tapped into their executive function. An executive function is basically measuring the ability to stay on task or not be distracted. The study revealed that children who watch SpongeBob performed significantly worse on the executive function task than the children in the other 2 groups, when they were controlling for child attention, age, and television exposure. So this only shows that not only does the amount of exposure matter, but what they are exposed to as well. Children learn how to behave from television. Last year, if you guys knew, that they released 13 Reasons Why, which is a show about a suicidal high schooler who commits suicide and gives the 13 reasons why she does it. Dan Nelson, a medical director of child psychiatry inpatient unit at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, had a 12-year-old patient who told him, "I saw that show and it really convinced me that suicide was a normal thing to do." In a study published in the journal JMA Internal Medicine, researchers tracked the frequency and trends of Google's search terms on suicide-related terms for 19 days following the premiere of the show. The search phrase, "how to commit suicide," increased about 26% above what was normally expected for that time. And suicide prevention rose 23%. Overall, the increase in suicide-related search terms revealed 900,000 to 1.5 million more searches than what was expected in those 19 days. And this show was different than in this portrayal of suicide because it actually showed the graphic detail of her committing suicide. So, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, in-depth studies indicate that violence seen by children on television can contribute to aggressive behavior, desensitization to violence, nightmares, and a fear of being harmed, similar to the mean world syndrome. So children are imitators, and the and those who watch violent shows are more likely to display aggressive behavior. So now you know more a bit on the effects of watching too much television on children. First, I detailed the amount of TV that kids are exposed to. Then we learned of a theory and its conclusions. And finally, how television can affect the development of young minds. Children are easily impressionable, and they observe from television or digital media and can deeply affect how they grow up. And this translates into how they behave in society. Thank you.
Sound like a 65-year-old. It's like.
Right, well, the proposition at the beginning is pretty clear. That, I think, is a good thing. There's source citations on most of the information that you present. That's a good thing. Some of the material that you're presenting, I think, is getting paraphrased. It would maybe be a little bit better to quote it directly, although there were a couple of direct quotes that are also still pretty vague. That's a little bit problematic. There's some nice statistical information that talks about the relationship to how much time kids are using screen media, and I thought that you had some good background information on that. The relationship to harm, though, I thought was a little bit non-specific. There's some general stuff, like the whole second point I think is a little problematic. The notion that kids or anybody is going to be fearful of the world, they see that in a negative way, so on and so forth. It is a theory. There's no demonstration that people are acting out on this way. This theory is 50 years old, so where's the information that backs this up, that people have reduced their exposure to the rest of the world because they see it as such a negative place? Are we traveling less? Do we go out less? Do we socialize infrequently? Do we spend less time outside? Are we paranoid about this? How do we measure those things? It's a theory, and there's not much more here. And that's one of the things that I think is a little bit problematic about the presentation. It doesn't sound at all, where are you? I know you're there. It doesn't sound like an argument. It sounds like an informative speech. And if you look at the secondary claims that you've got, they're all phrased not as declarative statements, but as informative tags. I'm going to show you how, we asked the question, how much television do they watch? Or, I'm going to explain the theory that comes along with watching too much television. Or, we're going to talk about how does it influence people? You're going to answer those questions. The answer should be your claim. Your argument should be watching too much, television watching is increasing dramatically. Watching television a lot is dangerous. Here are the particular consequences that come from watching TV. Just the phrasing of the secondary points is going to make it sound a lot more like an argument as opposed to, well, here's some research that I did on television. I'm just going to share this information with you. What's the controversy on some of this kind of stuff? Does anybody dispute that people sometimes watch more TV than they're supposed to? I don't know that anybody disputes that. The question is, how harmful is it? How can we measure those harms? What is the impact on our social system as a consequence? And that's what we need more of. And I just thought that's the more vague information that you've got, the mean world syndrome. And then there's the one quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics that basically throws in 7 nasty things without any, documentation on it. It says, and all this stuff can happen. I'm going, okay, that they're making this argument. What's their information? That I think you need to kind of drop a level when it comes to the research and get to the more basic stuff. You're presenting the conclusions without necessarily telling us what the basis of the argument was, and I think that's a little problematic. All right, thank you.